5 to 7 now. Central government is too metropolitan, too short-term, too siloed, too rivalrous and too focused on the preoccupations of Westminster and Whitehall. So says a less than complimentary critique of the civil service from the Reform think tank published this morning. Philip Rycroft is a former Permanent Secretary, the most senior civil servant in a government department, and was interviewed for this report. Morning to you.
Good morning.
Whitehall structures would be familiar to Gladstone, says this report, which suggests there's a scope for a shake-up.
There is scope for a shake-up, and this is a really important piece of work because it asks the question, why is Whitehall so difficult to reform? It's not as though there haven't been lots of attempts to reform Whitehall, and there have been changes over time, but change is not quick enough to meet the needs of the country that the civil service works for.
Why is it so difficult?
I think there are three things here. One is the gravitational pull of big policy. People like me got out of bed in the morning to make big policy, to work on big policy with ministers, the adrenaline kick you get from that. And management too often comes a bit of a distant second. Second thing is people think of Whitehall as a big monolith. It's not. It's a series of baronies heaped up around secretaries of state. And the centre's actually quite weak, and that makes pushing reform through the system very difficult. But the third thing, and this is really, really important, is a sort of lack of political will. For most ministers, this is not a high priority. And if the cabinet secretary who wants to push reform can't show that they've got the full-hearted support of the prime minister, it makes it very difficult to get reform through the system.
This report points out that the British cabinet is twice the size of President Biden's and 4 times the size of President Xi Jinping's. Is that a good or a bad thing?
In my view, that's not a good thing. Too many ministers trying to do too much. I mean, one of the big features of Whitehall, of course, it does a load of stuff that would be done way better locally or regionally. And we see that even in the reports over the last couple of days, the Prime Minister sort of intervening, worrying about 20 mile per hour zones in towns and cities up and down the country. This is the stuff of local government. Whitehall simply attempts to do too much, and part of the consequence of that is you've got too many ministers sort of clotting up the system.
Briefly, will things ever change?
Oh, they can change and they will change, but this report demonstrates the sort of barriers to change that need to be overcome. It's a great piece of work.
Thanks for your time.